everybody. Psychic Medium Angelo here, joined by my esteemed colleague. He is the guru who knew. He is the Encyclopedia Britannica of pro wrestling, all things wrestling, Jeff, the Ref Robinson. And we are joined by our special guest, our friend, our compadre in crime, Mike, the movie maker Messier. How you guys doing today, fellas?
I'm doing great. Happy New Year to you, Angelo. Happy New Year to you, Mikey.
Thank you, Jeff. Happy New Year, Mikey.
Hey guys, thanks for having me, Jeff, and thanks for having me, Angelo. Thanks for bearing with my circumstances today, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, look, by car, by plane, by boat, as long as you're here.
Hey, we will interview you no matter where you are.
Exactly. So here's what we're going to do. I want to, first of all, thank everyone. Jeff's got some exciting news to share with everybody. So, Jeff, let me give the drum roll.
I want to personally thank, on behalf of me and Angelo and Wrestling with the Future podcast and everybody, we want to thank all of our listeners for giving us 60,000 downloads on Podbean only. And I only say that because I know that there's others out there that we have been downloaded on, but 60,000. Thank you guys. Thank you very, very much for downloading.
And that's only what we can verify. We don't know what iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher.
So, as I have said, we are the little podcast that could, and we're chugging along, and 2020 is going to be bigger and better and awesome, more awesome.
It absolutely is, and we're going to talk about some of the upcoming guests we got coming scheduled for 2020, and it is a veritable who's who of pro wrestling, past and present, and quite frankly, future. We got some future stars coming on as well.
Yep.
But to talk about the year in review, we got two of the finest guys with the brightest minds in wrestling today, Mikey and Jeff. And I'm just kind of like the old fart that tagging along here. Although Mikey would argue that he's an older fart than I am.
I don't buy that Mikey's his age. I really don't.
By 6 months.
I don't buy that you're as old as you are, Mikey.
Then how old am I now? How old did I become?
61?
No, I'm not quite 61.
How old are you?
I'm younger than that, but no, I'm a little bit younger than 61. But guys, I mean, when I think about January of 2019, I think of Becky Lynch, Asuka, the Royal Rumble. If you talk about the year in review, I just was trying to jog my memory to the earliest memories, and it was I guess it was the second women's Royal Rumble match. And the Becky Asuka match and the things that happened there.
And
yeah, for sure.
And that was also right when Becky was taken off with the man character.
Yeah.
And I mean, and Ronda Rousey and her they were Twitter beefing and getting people talking. I mean,
oh boy.
So much so they talked themselves into the main event of WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, and I think, Mikey, you would agree with me and Angelo. I never thought I would see the day that women headline a WrestleMania, ever.
Well, we knew it was inevitable. It was just a matter of, was it going to be, this year, or was it going to be a year or two down?
I was thinking maybe even 5 years from now. I didn't see it happen as soon as it did.
I thought it was destined for at least 2021, 22.
All right, what about you, Mikey?
Well, the thing is that I would go back to the old school and say that the first WrestleMania, you could almost make a case that the co-main event or the second match from the top was Wendy Richter versus Leilani Kai.
No doubt.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Because Wendy Richter and Leilani, they definitely put those asses in the seat at Madison Square Garden. I mean, I think a lot of fans don't even realize at WrestleMania 1 took place at 2 in the afternoon or 3 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
At Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, it was a matinee show. Yeah.
And it was basically not meant to be nothing more than a hyped up house show that they named.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And because it started getting all the hype, it started getting publicity. And then because Mr. T was involved, and you started all the entertainment people.
Yeah.
Now, what funny story that goes with WrestleMania 1, kind of got to believe it, was Linda McMahon. She said she was out on the loading dock of Madison Square Garden, and all of a sudden one of the head members of the local Hells Angels chapter pulled up, and he said, "I need tickets," and they told me we're sold out. He said, "I need 50 tickets, and I need you to make it happen." And she said, "What are you going to tell a Hells Angel?"
Right.
She said, "I made it happen."
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
exactly. I heard that story, by the way, and it's all true.
So began her career in politics.
Well, yeah, it's true because it's been verified by several sources.
Now, okay, let's see.
Well, let's talk about. Let me stop you there, Jeff. Let's talk about the top 5 stories of 2019. If we had to narrow it down to the top 5, 2 come to mind right away.
Well, I would put the women's main event of WrestleMania in the top 5. I would have to. What about you, Mike?
Oh, absolutely.
I'd put AEW getting the TNT network deal as the #1 story. I would probably put the women's wrestling match in Saudi Arabia as #2.
Oh, I forgot about that one, but yeah.
I'd probably put women headlining WrestleMania at #3.
Yeah.
I'd probably put NWA Power making a place for themselves as #4. And #5, I would probably say something like an all-encompassing. I put a 5 and a 5B, so a 5 and a 6. 5, I'd say the rise of the independent groups, like other groups like Impact and MLW.
Well, yeah.
Even
tying into that, Mikey, I think I agree absolutely with the 4 of the 5. And I agree with that. Those are my.
I couldn't argue with that top 5 being a top 5. I really couldn't.
Not at all. But here's the only distinction I made. But it kind of ties into what Mikey just said. My #5 would be the exodus from WWE of so many stars to go to other groups.
That was my #6.
Yeah.
But how many have really exited?
A lot.
John
Moxley. Who else? Jericho,
sort of.
We have a whole list of about 10 to 12 people that were undercard wrestlers who were under contract who left. Not only between NXT, well, hold on, Jeff. Not only between NXT, Raw, and SmackDown to go to other promotions, including going back to the indies. This is the first time that we've seen people leave NXT to go back to the indie circuit because they make more money.
Well, now that is very true, especially if you had name value on any of those 3, and you can go to the indies, and you're going to be able to fetch between $600 to $1,000 from any indie promoter, depending on how good you are with your sales game. Honestly,
sure, absolutely.
But I would say, I was actually going to say #5 for me would, if I were to take anything out, I would maybe say the resurgence, which is actually kind of causing a resurgence in wrestling business, is the NXT and AEW Wednesday Night War.
Okay, so now let's do this then, Jeff. Mikey and I both gave 6. What would your #6 be?
My #6 would probably be for me, actually, I would say it's probably the downfall of ROH right now.
I couldn't argue with that.
That has been
that's a real good point, Jeff. Real good point. Mikey, what do you think about that? Where does ROH rate among the top 3 or 4?
I mean, I think Jeff made a great point, and I think that ROH has been involved or owned, I guess, by Sinclair Broadcasting, which has been a huge turnoff for me personally. And just to make it clear, it's not because it's right-wing politics. It's because it's any politics. I don't like my wrestling mixed with politics.
Yeah.
So when people have talked about ROH for the last 4 or 5 years, I've kind of tuned out, to be honest. I mean, I had some friends like Matt Taven, Mike Kanellis went through there. Vinny Marcelli is a friend of mine. But when those guys were in ROH, I really can't say that I was watching ROH that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, last year at this point, they were looking like they may be turning a corner for the better.
Right.
However, with Cody and the Young Bucks and the exodus that they had, they got hit hard.
I want to mention a group to you guys that I know you're both familiar with. It's a group that's based out of the Northeast here, out of actually New York. They're making a big, big name for themselves and making a lot of noise. It's a group called House of Glory.
Yep.
Okay. What do you guys think? Where does an up-and-coming a promotion, by the way, that's got some financial backing to it, where does House of Glory rate among the upper echelon, or are they there yet?
They're not quite there yet because, and I mean, I'm not speaking ill on them. I wish them well and I want them to do good, but they're not on, they may be on YouTube, but they're not being seen on any other platforms, and they're not on Fight TV yet, and haven't done.
Well, they're on local cable, so they got some television,
and that's good. That's better than some of the indies out there. But,
right. Yeah. And Jeff, how important is television
these days? Not as important as it is if you can get it on a streaming site.
So you think that's the wave of the future? Mikey, you're in the film business. You worked your whole life in film and television. Does Jeff have a point there with streaming? Is that the future?
Well, it's the present. I mean, it's the present, but I would say this. TV is still king. And AEW on TNT, which was really my number one pick, and Jeff kind of rephrased it with the AEW NXT war. Same thing. It's to me, if you have television, if you have a mainstream, even in 2020 now, if you have TNT, you have USA Network, you have the E Entertainment Channel, you have one of these stations that everybody knows. I'm sorry, even with YouTube TV, even with Hulu, all the different ways to get those channels, those are still the big money players. So things that are like the NWA Power, for a wrestling fan, for the three of us, we can compare AEW to NWA. For the, quote, casual fan or mainstream fan, they know AEW. A friend of mine who doesn't even like wrestling, but he knows that I like wrestling. He said, what's this AEW thing on TNT? I wouldn't have expected my friend to ask me that because he's not a wrestling fan, but here he is asking. But he's not asking me about NWA Power or House of Glory. No offense to those companies, but the more mainstream you have, even if it's a 1997 mainstream thing like TNT, even now it's still holding on.
I'm going to say this too. I mean, out of the indie promotions out there right now that I see that it could be on the come up, I think MLW is going to be the next one to rise. I really do.
Yeah, you know what, Jeff? I'm glad that you mentioned MLW. Of course, that is owned and operated by Court Bauer, who was former head writer of WWE, WWF, I should say, to be technical about it. And Court, for those of people listening and watching and don't know, Court has amassed quite a financial backing for himself. He's a wealthy guy, and he's not afraid to spend his money.
And he's locking a lot of the younger talent under contracts. To where they can work other indie dates as long as they guarantee they'll be there for his show. Got like Brian Jr. under it. You have
absolutely.
You have our current VCW champion Gino, who just got signed with them, who's getting ready to work a major angle with I can't say her name because I can't. She's a Latina, and he's got an angle working with her where she's going to maybe be his manager or something along those lines, and so he's kind of getting thrust into the spotlight right there. But I mean, I think MLW really has a chance to be on the come up. I mean, not only are they on YouTube every Saturday, they also have a presence on the BN network, which is on cable. It's on one of them channels that you can hardly see, but they are there.
Well, now there's a question in there, whether you know it or not. You prompted a question from me, which is the extended use or the heavy use of YouTube by not only independent promotions but now established groups that are using the YouTube streaming services. Mikey mentioned it, YouTube TV, Roku, Hulu.
I think it's a way
services like that.
I think it's all a matter of way of getting your product and getting it out there and getting it known. I mean, social media right now is at probably the highest height I've ever seen it in my life. And now granted, it hasn't been around but so long. I mean, people don't realize YouTube is only a little over like 12 years old.
Yeah, true.
The first people to really utilize it on any kind of mega platform was during the election between Obama and McCain.
Yeah, true enough.
And so, I mean, it's still a baby. It's still in its infancy. You got Twitter now that's starting to really kind of make a headway out there. Facebook is going to be there. They're going to remain. They're going to always be there. Instagram is really starting to do something, some good, and then you got Snapchat. I mean, and WWE even has a Snapchat deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
now, it's Jeff, as you're saying this, it ties actually directly into a show that you and Mikey are going to be involved with. And we're let people know that one of the things we got coming up very soon is, we lost Mikey.
He's gone.
Am I still here?
Oh, yeah. Where are you, Mikey? Here we are.
Okay. You disappeared.
Yeah, that's what happens when Mikey plays with his camera.
Well, I was having a little audio trouble, guys, and I was trying to adjust it, but keep going, please.
Okay. So I was just telling everyone, Mikey, that one of the things that we have coming up that ties directly into what Jeff was talking about is our social media show that we're going to do with you and Shane McKenna.
Right.
Yeah, the head of the Wrestling Fans Facebook group. He's the admin.
Well, Shane's a good guy. He's a little misguided at times, and when I say misguided, it's not because Shane's a bad guy. He's a great guy. It's just that he puts a lot of stock in WWE, I think. And what I've been trying to inform Shane and other wrestling fans is that there's more to professional wrestling than WWE.
Well, let me stop you there, Mikey. It's funny. When you speak to the average person on the street, the casual viewer, if you will.
Right.
When you say wrestling, automatically, I guess by assimilation,
it is.
WWE is what people think of wrestling, quote unquote, wrestling.
Truth be told, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is actually McMahon and whether you want to call it creative genius or not, but his genius behind branding that name and making it where he made WWF so well known in the 80s that people who are my age now at 42, they grew up with WWF being wrestling, and that's where they still associate. Some of them will even still say, "Oh, do you mean the WWF?" And then you gotta go, "Oh, you mean WWE?" And then you get really confusing to them, and then
Well, now, Mikey, what do you think here?
I think what it takes, guys, and it's no offense to Shane or Chris Old or anybody in that wrestling fans group, which is very active. It's that the wrestling fan owes it to him or herself to be proactive and educate themselves. And if you're not watching Starrcade 83, if you're not watching Starrcade 85, Tully Blanchard versus Magnum TA, don't consider yourself on the level of a Mike Messier as far as
or
a Jeff
fan. Yeah,
or
exactly.
Or
an Angelo who's older than both of you.
Well, my point is that when I was a young wrestling fan, I would get Sports Review Wrestling Magazine in the mail, and they would have these articles that were 10, 15, 20 years ago. They would discuss the things from the past.
I love that.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Right.
See, I grew up with Pro Wrestling Illustrated was the first one.
1979, first issue.
And what they call the After Mags.
Right. Yep.
Made famous by Bill Apter. You had Pro Wrestling Illustrated, of course. You had Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, all of in Pro Wrestling USA. All of these magazines were available at every newsstand. And then with the influx of the electronic media, we saw the wrestling magazines go by the wayside.
Yep.
So wrestling fans, to Mikey's point, wrestling fans only know what they see, and what they see is WWE.
I would challenge any wrestling fan out there right now, if you want to really get to know the business, get on eBay, spend $10, $20, not 20, but maybe buy you a few of the After Mags, the old ones.
Yeah.
And go back and read them. And
I'll tell you what, there's history in those pages, Jeff.
There is.
There's a lot of history there.
I'll say this. Yes, a lot of the articles are kayfabed. We know that. But that's what made it fun.
Thank you.
And after and the editors of that and the people that wrote for those magazines helped drive the storylines.
And in doing that, Jeff, they drove the storyline, which drove the angles and the sales.
There you go.
Sales.
They would.
People don't know.
After we call up, and he would say, "What big angle? What big whatever do you have coming on?"
People don't know that, Jeff, because they don't know their history. You both of you guys know. If you know anything about me, and here's how I say it. Jeff is my wrestling guy. Mikey is my historian.
Yeah.
And I'm history. Okay? Here's what I mean by that. I lived it.
Yeah.
I lived it. I'm talking about, my first match was 1965. I know at least one of you weren't even born at that point. I don't know if Mikey was, because he lies about his age.
I'm an actor. I
know you're an actor. You're like a wrestler. You can't trust an actor.
Can't trust a wrestler either.
In 1965, there you go. You got that right, Mikey. In 1965, my dad wasn't even thinking about kids. He had just graduated high school, and he was worried about going to Vietnam. So
here's my history.
Here's what I was getting at, guys, earlier. When I talked about that Sports Review Wrestling, what happened 5, 10, 15 years earlier. Mm-hmm. That was my favorite monthly column in Sports Review Wrestling. Yes. I just wish that some of today's fan who has it so much easier than we did, all they have to do is go to YouTube, not go to the WWE network, because the WWE network puts a filter on it. Like when you watch ECW, for instance, on the WWE network, you don't hear the Sandman's entrance to
and that actually kind of points it, in my opinion.
What's that?
Say that again, Jeff.
I said that kind of ruins it, in my opinion, to not hear Sandman's entrance when you're watching it.
Well, but you have to remember something now, because everything is so corporate. They're so wrapped up in legalities. All of that stuff is copyrighted.
Oh yeah. But I know what Mikey's saying. He's saying wrestling fans, if you want to get a true feel of it,
right,
instead of watching it on the network, go to YouTube and try to find the actual old footage.
bootleg you got to get the bootleg stuff, because I had a video 2 years ago which was collect your wrestling contraband, which is your DVDs, your VHSs, because if the WWE ever sells out to Disney or the Saudi Arabian government, then you're going to see a lot more censorship. Do you think that the Disney mouse, is going to tolerate Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard bleeding, or even Steve Austin and Bret Hart bleeding at WrestleMania 13? So
well, Mikey, let's remember recent history. Let us not forget that not one, but two major promotions ran shows right out of Disney Studios.
WCW?
WCW. No, sir. They were in Universal.
That's a good point.
Hold on. It's part of the Disney property. Let's be real clear about it, Jeff.
Universal is not owned by Disney. They're owned by MGM.
They were advertising as Disney. But let's be real clear. Two promotions ran out of Disney. WCW and Eddie Mansfield.
TNA did too.
Who?
TNA.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So
we're not saying, and I want to be real clear about this, we're not saying that Disney is condoning the use of bleeding in their wrestling product, because it's really not their wrestling product. They happen to be on the Disney property. Let's put it that way.
You know what? I'll say this. I would love to have here. I've heard only very sparingly the stories and the tales of the wrestlers there in MGM when WCW would go down there and film.
Yeah.
And they said by day 3, they were about gonzoed, and they were wandering the park and doing God knows what.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that people don't know about Disney. They weren't wrestling fans.
No,
they were people. No, they were people who went to Disney. Disney rounded up audiences. They'd say, "Hey, you want to see a wrestling show?" And it was all free. It was all papered. What they papered the house.
And they would hold up. They actually had signs: applaud, boo.
Exactly. Like a TV show, like a show.
But do you legitimately think, Mikey, that they would sell out to Disney? Seriously?
I think that in the last couple of years, there's been some online articles and quotes from Stephanie, and I think mostly Stephanie McMahon and maybe Triple H, that they would consider selling the company. And I think I'm still not sure if this story is true or accurate or not. But that Saudi Arabian deal, supposedly there was an asterisk that if the WWE ever decides to sell, the Saudi Arabians have the first right to make an offer. I don't know if that story is true or not, but that was there someone.
Jeff, what do you know about that?
I've read the same article now, but I have also read where it's been pretty much kiboshed by WWE.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say, though, that they didn't put the kibosh on it to quit people from talking. Right. And it ain't legit. But I want to say it was Hunter, I think it was Triple H, who came out and said, the only deal that we have with them is to go there for a certain number of shows per year. And not.
I don't think there's a chance in hell that WWE will ever sell out to the Saudis. I do not think that there's ever a chance that they will sell to Disney. I think they're more likely, quite frankly, to sell, if they do sell at all, which is a big if. If they do sell, it will be to a major media company, U.S.-based.
Very interesting.
It will be a media company like Fox, like CBS, like NBC.
Well, I think when people get the fear of the mouse coming in is because the mouse now owns Fox.
And Star Wars. Doesn't Disney own Star Wars?
Yep. Yeah. But let's be clear. These are properties and entities owned by the umbrella of Disney. Now, to be very fair and to be very clear, there are more than 75 different companies under the Disney umbrella. More than 75. Okay?
They got a shit ton of money, man. That's all I got to say.
They are into everything. They're into the fast food business, restaurants, gourmet cooking. They are into other theme parks. They own their own cruise line.
Yeah.
They're into a lot of different things. The Disney.
I got a question for Mikey really quick.
Also, now, wait a minute. Hold on, Jeff.
Oh, sorry.
They're also in the television business, Mikey's industry, the film business.
Sure.
They've got their hands in a little bit of everything.
Right. Yes. Now, Mike, I got a question for you, brother.
Yes.
Where do you see AEW at the end of the year in 2020?
That's a great question. I think, to be honest, I think they might be right where they're at right now. I feel like that this is a passion project for Tony Khan, and I'm not putting Tony Khan down, but I'm just saying, to me, what this feels like is rich guys doing rich guy stuff. Yeah. Hey kids, let's put on a show. And guess what? I'm not even insulting him. I'm just saying that I don't particularly mind that that's what it is. If there's a rich guy who likes wrestling and he wants to play with his real life human action figures, and Chris Jericho was his favorite wrestler in ECW in 1995 at SummerSlam, and 25 years later, he gets to put a shiny gold belt around Chris Jericho's waist, and maybe Tony's getting some women out of this on the down low. Then guess what? I actually don't have a problem with it.
Well, I
will tell both of you guys, I think that you're both wrong.
Okay.
Well, I didn't say my input yet.
Oh, you haven't. I thought you were agreeing with Mikey.
I do, but here's what I was going to say.
Well, go ahead and I'll shut my mouth.
Here's why I agree with Mike.
Go ahead.
And I see it it could be a downfall. I actually see Tony Khan, if he keeps on being more hands-on, as a downfall for that company, because the one bitch that WWE fans have had too much Vince McMahon, too much Stephanie, and too much Triple H and Shane.
Okay, stop right there, Jeff.
Wait. Oh.
I'll tell you why. Because now you're going to where I'm going.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. Here's what I think. I think Tony Khan is far more like Vince McMahon than either of us realize. And I'll tell you why.
I don't.
I do. I'm going to tell you why. And here's why. There's two overwhelming reasons why. Both men have exorbitant wealth. Okay?
Tony's just from his daddy, but go ahead.
Both men, well, it doesn't matter if it's daddy's money or not. He's got money. Okay? Number two, neither one of these men, Tony Khan or Vince McMahon, neither one of them know failure. I do not believe for one moment that this is just a toy pet project for Tony Khan. I think Tony Khan is serious about making some scratch. He's got some money invested, and he's got, to your point, Jeff, he's got a lot of his daddy's money invested.
Unless, I'm going to go here. Tony Khan made a big mistake already this year.
He's made a couple of them.
When he got into a Twitter beef with Randy Orton. He's the president of the company.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon does not lower himself in Twitter beef with nobody.
True.
Neither does Triple H. Neither does Shane McMahon. Neither does Stephanie. Now, this is why I agree with Mikey that it's him maybe playing with his real life action figures. Right now, their booking is so haphazard. They got no storylines, and they're using the same matches, same guys every week. And it's not me putting them down. It's what I hear people saying is their main complaint.
Okay, go ahead.
And Right now, they got no house shows even scheduled.
All right, let me stop you. You mentioned two things that the WWE has done and continues to do. Rehash, reload, redistribute the same matches over and over. I mean, if I saw John Cena and Randy Orton one more time, I was going to explode.
And part of that, though, is, and WWE is right now living the backlash of them being the only sole person around that was able to give the guys money.
Right. And the other thing, too, Jeff, that you brought up, that both companies are in the same boat again. Not only the same matches rehashed over and over, but neither company, neither one of these top two companies have a house business.
WWE at least still tries.
Well, they try only in the respect that there's a television camera there capturing everything.
No, they still.
That's not a house show.
No, they still do house shows.
WWE still does house shows, Angelo. There's just not many fans coming out to see them.
They now, I mean, to put that in perspective, they went to the Norfolk Scope, and it was a house show, and they maybe had 3,000 fans there, and a 10,000 seat arena. Now
they haven't been to Philadelphia in 7. Listen to me. They have not done a live show in Philadelphia other than Raw or SmackDown in 7 years.
They just did the Madison Square Garden house show, though, that Andrade won the U.S. title at.
That's the Garden. That's the Mecca.
My point is, and Mike's too, why are they going to go to the Philadelphia Spectrum right now when they can't, when that's a 20,000 plus seat arena?
Well, the Spectrum's gone, but it's the Wells Fargo Center, yeah.
Well, okay. But it's at least 20,000, right?
27,000.
So why are they going to go there and lose their ass when they can go to a 10,000 seat arena and lose their ass?
They can't fill it.
So why are you going to pay that rent?
You can't. They can't afford to. That's the answer. They can't afford to fill it.
I would jump in, guys, if I could, and say that
please do.
The WWE for several years has been doing house shows with declining attendance.
Yep.
And every once in a while, like every 2 or 3 years, they'll do something like this Andrade winning the U.S. title at a house show in order to kind of pepper the pot a little bit. But the fans are so in on the game, so to speak, now. The fans see it for what it is. That it's just a way to pepper the pot and get you a little bit interested.
I think what I was getting at, though, I think AEW would be wise to actually do a little bit of a house show business and see how they would do.
Does anybody know what kind of numbers they drew at the Garden?
They almost sold it out.
At Madison Square Garden?
You're talking about WWE for the most recent house show, Jay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that they did it well over 10,000.
I can't.
That's not a sellout.
I don't know.
Not a Garden.
I would say this, guys, if I could, about this. Why isn't AEW doing house shows yet? I think we're all kind of holding AEW to a standard that's not fair. Whether it's Tony Khan is a rich guy or not, you're asking a company that's literally been in business for less than a calendar year, or less than a full year, 12 months, to be at the same standard of operation of a company that Bruno Sammartino beat Buddy Rogers on May 17th, 1963, I believe. So 1963 compared to 2019, 2020, that's a big head start. So when people say that AEW is getting blown away by NXT and NXT is the third product and you know that AEW doesn't have a chance, well, my point is, hey guys, you know, you're comparing an apple and an orange in a race that the apple has a 1963 advantage. versus 2019.
I think you bring up a good point, Mikey. I think that the fact that AEW, for all intents and purposes, is still a blip on the radar, whereas the WWE is it is the radar.
Right. That's a great way of putting it. And you just nailed it, Angelo. When WWE is the radar. Now, my point to Shane McKenna and to other guys that are intelligent young wrestling fans is, guys, before there was WWE as this hierarchy monarchy, we had the Jim Crockett promotions. We had the Mid-South.
Right.
Those promotions are still available if you seek them through the bootleg tape traders, YouTube, or even if you watch the homogenized version on the WWE Network, which might be a nice way to get. But you could also explore these MLWs, these impacts. The House of Glory, Jeff's promotion, has a big show on Saturday night in Virginia. So, I mean, always support your local independent wrestling scene.
I always say that because that is, you watch the indies and that is where you're going to see your upcoming stars. I can tell you this. 3 years ago, we had a young man who came in and wrestled in VCW. It was either 2 or 3 years ago. Now he's talking at WWE NXT, and he's the original bro, Matt Riddle.
Right.
Right.
I mean, and when we brought him in, he was just that guy from UFC.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the guys that I mentioned earlier, I forgot a big one. Mike Bennett, Vinny Marseglia, and who's the guy with the beard in NXT? The guy that's Tommaso Ciampa was Top Rope Promotions out of Fall River, Mass. I was the commentator and the ring bell guy for several years.
Wow.
We had Biff Busick, who's now Oney Larkin.
Yep.
We had some awesome talent there doing awesome matches in front of 400 people in Fall River, Mass. And so, when we talk about the year in review, I've got to say that the lifeblood of professional wrestling is going to be your VFWs, your high school gyms. That's the lifeblood. And for people who are tuned off or tuned out to these WWE Saudi Arabia debates, or they don't want to watch Chris Jericho at age 49 wrestle, then watch something different. And that's your local wrestling group, as always.
Yep.
Well, that leads me into the question of the indies. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a huge resurgence back to the indies. People are turning out to the high school gyms, to the VFW, to the local armories, and they're spending $15 or $20 for a ticket.
Yep.
To see a live show, to sit down for 2.5, 3 hours and watch, to get their fix of wrestling.
The indies,
a lot of them can't afford, $150 for a ticket.
The indies
to see WWE.
Well, the indies of today are your territories of yesteryear.
Right.
That's an interesting point, Jeff. That's a real interesting point.
You got guys who may be mainly Northeast indie based. You got guys who are Southern indie based. And you can go if you got somebody who you follow. Due to social media, you can find out where they're going to be and maybe find them in a show and maybe 50 miles away. But you may want to go and check them out again. I would challenge, again, any real wrestling fan, but I would challenge any wrestling fan. If you've never been to an indie, go. You're going to have the time of your life.
Well, you're going to see something at an indie show that you won't see at a large arena show. And that's a couple of things that you're going to see. You're going to see up close, personal wrestling.
Yep.
Happening right in front of you.
Yep.
10, 15 feet away from the ring. You're going to see name talent, people have seen on television, and you're going to be able to shake their hand and talk to them. You're going to see people who once was and people who will be. You will see the old timers and you will see the future superstars.
It's a great mix of talent. It really is.
Case in point, we just, Jeff, I saw, J.J. Dillon, Tatanka, and Flying Brian Jr. in October. And we just had Teddy Hart and his cousin, Davey Boy Smith Jr., the British Bulldog.
That's that.
Okay. Now you can see these guys on MLW on television. Right?
Yeah, Teddy Hart's no longer with MLW. He had a falling out.
Again, okay. Well, that's Teddy.
Yeah, there you go.
That's Teddy's mouth.
I mean, Mikey, I'll ask Mikey this. Who on the Indies right now, knowing that you follow it, somewhat or closely?
Sure.
Who do you see as being that next breakout indie darling, so to say, that AEW and WWE are going to be going after?
I'm surprised that there hasn't been more buzz towards the Flying Brian Pillman Jr., to be honest with you, because his father, at this point, established a real cult legacy. I mean, I have a Flying Brian Pillman Stomp action figure tattoo on my leg. So if anyone knows about the cult-like following of Flying Brian,
that's nuts.
Right. It is pretty nuts.
Brother. I don't even have a wrestling tattoo yet, so.
And Pillman Jr., from all accounts, is kind of a throwback to the, Gee Whiz babyface guy.
Oh, boy.
I've communicated with Flying Brian Jr. a little bit, and he seems like a real nice guy, and he's almost got this aw shucks thing, which I think is great, because that means he's doing his own thing. He's not he's not trying to emulate his father. He's being his own man.
Yeah.
And in fairness to Brian and what he went through in his life, he never knew his father really, because he was an infant when his dad died. So
he was 5. Yeah, 5.
Right. Well, 5 years old.
He's got no real memory, and he even says that of his dad.
Yeah,
this has got to be tough. So I feel.
I had the chance to meet Brian in October and spoke to him at quite some length. I spent about a half an hour with him, and we communicate back and forth on Twitter. Jeff knows we've been in contact with him.
Trying to get him to come on here, but that boy's a busy boy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, he will be on the show
at some point this year.
Yes, he will be on the show. He made a commitment to me, but he is, like Jeff said, he is one busy kid. Because he's doing the right thing. He's taking every booking that comes his way.
Mikey, you were asking about why he doesn't really have the buzz yet. He does, but they're keeping it on the DL because he's pretty much told WWE and AEW in a roundabout way, I'll come to you guys when I'm ready. I'm with MLW under contract for the next year.
Okay.
Now, granted, they could buy him out. That's no problem. But
you mark my words. You're going to see Brian Pillman Jr. Mark my words. I assure you of this.
Yep.
You're going to see him in AEW. Before you ever see him in WWE, you're going to see him in AEW. I assure you of that.
But right now he's able to get out there. He got to wrestle Jushin Liger,
right,
which was a dream match of his.
Yeah,
and he's getting to have a lot of the quote unquote dream matches that he wants to have before he goes under contract to a major company.
Right. Well, the other thing too that we need to, it's the elephant in the room, and we have to talk about it. If Brian signs with WWE, he will not go directly to the main roster.
Nope, NXT.
He has to go to NXT. And for him, at this point in his career, quite frankly, that would be a step down.
I disagree with you.
It would be a step down. He's making a shit ton of money right now.
Okay.
He would take a pay cut.
Okay, but you take a pay cut versus guaranteed money. Guaranteed if they're going to take care of you if you get injured.
It's a lot of if, bro.
But there are guys. But there's guys there on that roster in NXT that he's going to want to face. I promise you.
There are guys on that NXT roster that have been there for 5-6 years and haven't moved.
And well, some of them don't want to.
Well, this is true.
Why Ciampa being one of them?
Let's talk about that, Mikey. Why do you think a guy on NXT is there for 5-6 years and wants to be there?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's probably some subterfuge between Triple H and Vince McMahon, father and son-in-law, however you want to phrase their relationship. Yeah. I think Triple H probably
about that.
I think guys like Tommaso Ciampa are probably and Gargano are probably guys that Triple H wants to protect and he wants to kind of keep in his back pocket, because I think Triple H, at least the image that we have of Triple H, is that he wants NXT to be a separate third brand.
Yep.
And be away from Vince's creative control, and be under his and maybe Shawn Michaels' creative guidance. And I think that's why you see guys like a Tommaso, who I think has spoken about his neck injuries, and that the reduced schedule of NXT, wrestling maybe twice, 3 times, 4 times a week, as opposed to 6 or 7 times, is better for a guy like Tommaso who's got some injuries. Yep. Many of those injuries probably happen on the NXT clock.
Well, Gargano, Johnny Gargano, he's already said he didn't want to go to the main roster because he knows that they wouldn't know how to use him properly.
Right.
And let's talk about that. Let's talk about how the main roster uses talent that's clearly proven in NXT and gets, I don't want to say sanitized, but, well, no, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to use that word. They get sanitized in WWE. It's almost like a separate company if you think about it.
It is kind of, yeah. Truth be told, it was said by Triple H, and maybe recently it's changed, but he said Vince never watched a day of NXT.
And that's absolutely true.
Now, he may, in recent years, meaning within the last year, may have changed his mind and watched a few episodes, but he hadn't watched any. So when you got guys who are hot in NXT, i.e. Aleister Black, what's his name? Who just went back to NXT?
Finn Balor?
Yeah, Finn Balor.
Yeah, Finn.
Mikey. I mean, it's like they get frustrated because they were being used down properly in NXT.
Thank you.
And then they go to the main roster and they're like, okay, I'm here. I had all the smoke behind me. What are you going to do?
Here's the problem. They have very few Kevin Owens to pick from.
Yeah.
I want you to think about this. It was John Cena who handpicked Kevin Owens.
Because he had seen him work and he knew he could do something with him.
Right. And for John Cena to lay down for a newbie on national television, 2 things occurs there. Number 1, a supreme confidence that John Cena's reputation will not be hurt. Number 1.
Yeah.
Number 2, he gets the opportunity to make a guy.
Yeah.
And he gets the opportunity to create a star.
And he did. And here's the problem right now with WWE on the main roster. They don't have a John Cena there to establish anybody.
And they don't have another Kevin Owens.
But to be fair, they don't have anybody to put over that NXT guy coming up.
Mike, what do you think?
I think you could still have a Roman Reigns.
There you go. I was gonna say Roman.
Good example, Mike.
Roman or Seth. I mean, one of those 2 guys at least could still work with an NXT call up. This whole thing about NXT and WWE is why I've really turned against WWE and not towards NXT, because I see things the way they are, guys. Even if the NXT show is more exciting, or the Fight Club of WWE, as they call it, it's still a part of WWE. It's your dollar in Vince's other pocket. You know what I mean? It's like the baseball fan.
What's wrong with, okay, but here, I will ask you, Mikey, what is wrong with supporting NXT if you don't like the big boys?
Because it's the same thing, because you're still supporting Vince McMahon.
No, you're okay.
I'll answer the question, Jeff. If you're supporting the NXT financially with your eyeballs, or buying a ticket, or an NXT t-shirt, then you're still supporting Vince McMahon. You're still supporting WWE, that supports Donald Trump, does their deals in Saudi Arabia.
Well,
your same dollar in Vince's other pocket.
Okay, but I don't think, I'll say this, I don't think the regular fan pays attention to any of that bullshit.
All right, let me
talking about me. See, that's the
all right, fellas.
I speak for myself. I don't speak for the regular fan.
Fellas, let me play Jeff the ref here for a minute. I want to play ref. Okay, let me say this. I'm a baseball fan.
Sure.
I love baseball. I love Major League Baseball, and I like AAA ball. If I can't afford $75 to buy a Phillies ticket,
there you go.
I can spend $10 to see the Farm Club. I'm still watching baseball. My dollar is still going in the Phillies bank account, but it's not going into the main club's account. It's going into the farm team's account. NXT, well, now hold on, Jeff. Hold on a second. NXT, true enough, is the other pocket of Vince McMahon. That's true enough. But the money generated, and let's talk about the money here. The money generated by NXT stays in NXT.
They got to pay the wrestlers.
Thank you. It's a self-contained company within a corporation. Let's be clear about it. When I go to see the Phillies, when I can afford a ticket, I know where my money's going. When I spend $10 to see the Farm Club, I know that $10 is going to pay that team. Granted, those players are not making, $20 million a year contracts. They may get, $75,000 or $125,000.
If they're like,
if they're getting that, right? Exactly. So, if you're a wrestling fan, to Jeff's point, doesn't really matter. I understand Mikey's point, and I do, Mike. I understand your point. You're still supporting WWE, but you're supporting a branch of WWE that is self-contained.
Yep.
Well, to me, that's like saying. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just saying the run is a separate brand. NXT, most wrestling fans don't even associate NXT with McMahon. They associate it with Triple H.
Well, that's a good point, Jeff. But go ahead, Mikey. I know you.
To me, the difference is like this. It's like saying, you know what? I don't support the Coca-Cola company. The Coca-Cola company is horrible. They have business practices I don't like. Here's my Diet Coke. I'm going to drink my Diet Coke instead because screw Coca-Cola. I mean, that's the difference.
No, it would be.
Wait, let me stop you there. You brought it up. You brought it up. Coca-Cola. I don't like Coca-Cola, but I like Sprite. Guess what? They're owned by the same company.
Yeah. Well,
Coca-Cola and Sprite are owned by the same company.
I guess it depends if we're talking the flavor in this metaphor. If we're talking the flavor of the soda, like the taste of it, or the business practices. What I don't like, what I guess people are missing, guys, and maybe you're not missing it, is when I say I don't like WWE, it's not because of the quality of the matches or the commentary or any of those things that might be up for debate as well. What I'm saying is I don't like their business practices as a company. I don't like them sending, and here's a guy we didn't mention today. I don't like them sending CM Punk a termination of contract on his wedding day. I don't like.
He came back. He came back.
Wait, hold on. Wait, stop. First of all, let's be real clear. CM Punk does not work for WWE.
Yeah, okay.
He hasn't worked for them since his termination.
He will. We're headed there.
Okay,
that's the big story of 2020.
Well, and that we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's be clear. Let's talk about flavors, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about flavors. Mikey doesn't like the business practice.
Correct.
Okay, let's be clear about something. Wrestling fans don't give a shit.
There you go.
They know what their wrestling is. Do I like this wrestling or do I like that? Look, NXT, and I'm going to put it out there. NXT and AEW are the flavors of the month right now. They're so competitive because they're so much alike. Okay? They're two separate companies, but they may as well be the same.
I totally disagree.
Please.
I'll give you the disagreement, Angelo.
I would love to hear it.
Okay, first of all, setting. NXT takes place as of now. Their weekly show is in the same venue it's always been, the NXT Arena or whatever they call it.
Full Sail University.
Right, Full Sail University. So it's basically in a, what, Jeff, 400 seats, you know, and it's a rabid crowd. The crowd has been with that company for a while. Not the same person, the same people in the audience every single time, but you could say a loyal fan base. The setting is basically the same week in and week out. It's like the old center stage WCW 1989 or something. Now, if you want to talk about AEW, you've got a different arena every Wednesday night. You're going to a 10,000 seat arena, whether it's Jacksonville, Florida, the other night, whether it's Charlotte. They're doing a lot of southern cities that have been kind of ignored for the last several years.
Okay.
The next thing is, to me at least, AEW feels less canned, less rehearsed, less scripted.
Okay.
WWE Raw and SmackDown are a lot worse than NXT with that scripted feel. But you can still see with the NXT show that they still have that, we're building up this backstage interviewer in order for her or him to go to SmackDown or Raw.
Okay.
Okay. Let me stop you there. Hold on, because
Go ahead.
Because I got something to say about that.
I do too.
Full Sail University is a captive audience of 400. AEW has a captive audience of 10,000. Okay? It doesn't matter the size of the venue. The product is the same product. It's wrestling.
And it
doesn't matter if you've got 25,000 people. Jeff, it doesn't matter if you got 400 people.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. And as far as the business practices, I'm a wrestling fan. I could give two shits what Vince McMahon does, as long as it's A, not immoral, B, not illegal, and C, not unethical.
But he's done immoral and unethical things.
If it doesn't affect my bottom line, I don't give a shit.
Okay.
Look, let's be real clear. I'm nobody's moral judge. Believe me when I tell you, I'm not.
All right.
Okay? But I'm not going to tell Vince McMahon how to do his business.
Yep.
I'm not going to do that. I want to watch the product and I want to enjoy it.
I want to make a point really quick.
Go ahead, Jeff.
When NXT does their takeover pay-per-view, so to say, they sell that son of a bitch out every time. And that crowd is very rabid. Yeah. Every one of them. So, I would challenge you, Mikey, to go and watch NXT TakeOver. Any of them from this past year. You watched the War Games that the women did.
I did watch that.
Tell me you weren't impressed.
I was impressed. I did like it.
I mean, and you cannot. I would compare AEW and NXT is, I guess, more polished as far as their wrestling goes. They're not as dangerous. A lot of the AEW guys, I can honestly say, and here's the problem that one of my friends who is he's been to an AEW pay-per-view even. This is what he said, is he had a problem, is he said, how are they ever going to establish anybody new when they keep on using WWE old talent and not using them to put the new guys over?
Well, let me address that.
Sure.
Let's talk about why NXT is more polished. They have a training facility that is, for all intents and purposes, their promotion's foundation.
Yep.
NXT, let us not forget, please, let us not forget, NXT is a developmental promotion.
Yep.
Okay? AEW has assimilated their talent from independent promotions across the United States and around the world. But they come from, the point is, they come from indie promotions. They will not have a polished feel. They've not been to a performance center. They don't have a training facility.
They don't have 8 coaches telling them this is how y'all are gonna what you're gonna work on today.
This is what
you're gonna work on today.
That's those you Angelo, you said about 5 minutes ago there was no differences, and now you're explaining the difference.
Well, no, I'm talking about the differences in the product. It's a
well, that's why I thought you said that there was no difference in the
He's
product.
saying that the wrestling product,
the wrestling product is the same product.
Well, it's well, hold on.
We're talking about
time out. Go, Mikey.
If you're saying that there's no differences, but you just explained that the difference is one group, NXT, is polished, and the AEW is a bunch of indie guys doing their thing, then that is a difference, isn't it?
No, because their wrestling style, if you watch them and you compare them, they're very, very similar.
Thank you. I'm talking about exactly what Jeff said, the product. The point I'm trying to make is this. You got a bunch of guys from the indies at AEW and a bunch of guys at NXT that are going through a training program. But what they're giving you on television is the same product. The point I'm trying to make is
they're giving you the same wrestling style.
Is it? I see differences. I see differences. If you guys don't see it, I can explain to you what I see as the differences if you want.
Go.
Yeah.
I can see that a Luchasaurus, and the little runt Marco Stunt versus the Lucha Brothers has a totally different feel to me than the Viking Raiders or whoever on the NXT side.
It better have a different feel. It's supposed to. You know why?
There's a difference right there. Then that's the difference.
We're talking about the difference in teams. I'm going to tell you why. Very clearly, and let's be real clear about this. The Jurassic Express, which is Luchasaurus, Jungle Boy, and Marco Stunt. Those 3 guys were put together for one reason, because they are so divergently different, they create an unusual looking team. Yep. The Lucha Brothers are like, those 2 guys are like, they're like 2 cogs in a wheel. They mesh like this. They're amazing. Sure. But that's supposed to be the dichotomy.
No, you're not going to see Lucha style on NXT because they don't have any Lucha wrestlers.
And we should point something out too, Jeff. Luchasaurus is an NXT graduate.
Dusty Rhodes gave him the idea and the name.
Thank you. He came from the Performance Center.
Yep. And what I was going to get at with, and I think what Mikey was trying to say, as far as them being scripted in the way that NXT does look, they have to have them that way because they got to get them ready in case they get that call of saying, hey, we want Adam Cole tomorrow.
Right.
There's something else that neither one of you guys mentioned that should be glaringly obvious.
What's that?
World Wrestling Entertainment.
Yep.
Which includes SmackDown, Raw, and NXT, are publicly traded companies. It's a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
They can't do a lot of the stuff AEW can do. Or MLW.
Well, case in point, AEW, Tony Schiavone said this on his podcast. Conrad was teasing him about it. Their announcers are allowed to say the word shit one time during their broadcast.
Yes, standards and practices will allow you that.
Now, NXT will never, WWE Raw, you'll never hear Jerry Lawler go, you will never hear Jerry Lawler utter puppies ever again.
Well, now, wait a minute now. Let's talk about what happened to Corey Graves. When Corey Graves uttered the word shit on live television, they all but cut his balls off for him.
Yeah.
Okay?
I mean, and they're not going to allow that to happen on their PG product.
They don't want to admit that there's a language out there that exists beyond their product.
Okay, so now we've got another difference, guys, which you're explaining better than I have, which is the use of vulgarity is more free on the AEW side.
I don't think
another difference.
Well, stop. The use of vulgarity or the lack thereof is not in one iota affecting the wrestling product.
Well, if people, wait a minute. I mean, here's the thing, Angelo. You've got to remember that you may not see it as being different, but a 13-year-old kid who gets a semi because Chris Jericho said shit on TV, that's a difference to the 13-year-old kid.
He's got a point.
Okay, but it's not. But I'm not a 13-year-old kid. I'm a 60-year-old man.
No, right, but we're not the target audience. None of us.
Okay, here's the deal.
Renee Young says, "Boy, that was a hell of a power bomb he took." Okay. If Excalibur says, "Look at that fucking power bomb he took," is it going to make any difference? No.
To us, it might not, but to the 13-year-old kid, like 30 years ago, when Beavis and Butthead came out, and they were very racy at the time, that attracted the teenagers. Who
was watching that? 13-year-old kids were watching.
Right, but guess who spends more money? 13-year-olds or Angelo, Jeff, and Mike? 13-year-olds spend more money than the three of us.
Now, and to be fair, and I'm going to agree with Mikey, here's the deal. WCW...
Parents' money, though, Mike.
But WCW, one thing that held WCW back when WWE pushed that envelope before they were publicly traded, they were willing to go balls to the wall and have a bra and panties match, and Nitro damn sure wasn't.
Right.
And I'll tell you this, as a 19-year-old young man, I was damn sure tuning into that bra and panties match.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you.
I'll tell you what, Angelo, at 60, you'd be watching a bra and panties match versus the Nitro girls.
I'd do it right now.
Thank you.
Here's the question I have. Does wrestling need Vince Russo back?
I think to be honest with you, as a buddy of Vince Russo, I think Vince would like to be wanted, but I think Vince is at the point of his life where he's disgusted. And I think that if Vince were to come back, it would be like an Eric Bischoff thing. He'd be there for 4 months. If you're talking about WWE, I can see Vince Russo working with AEW, believe it or not. If he and Cody can get over their shtick.
Well, it's interesting because Jeff and I had a conversation earlier today about, in fact, it was Chris Jericho just did an interview with Vince Russo on his podcast. And, you know, Jeff, I'm going to stop right now. You got to explain yourself, young man.
I was basically saying that Jericho was jacking Russo off in that interview, man. Jericho was Jericho and putting him over. He did his job as a co-host or as a host on a podcast, a nationally known podcast.
Okay, but Jeff, you watched, by your own admission, I was ready to
say I think Russo could do good for either WWE or AEW right now.
You think if Vince Russo came in to jumpstart and then took a step back, Mikey?
I would say that, you know what, we were talking about Flying Brian Pillman earlier, and I wanted to get this out at that time, but we moved on. I had a storyline for Flying Brian Pillman that could still work, but, you know, I don't think it would actually happen. So if I could share it with you guys think about this. So,
sure.
You know, remember Dakota, which was Cody and Terry Runnels' kid?
Yeah.
Well, she's a fine young lady. I think she's about 30 years old now. She's done some.
She's only 20.
Okay. Well, she's done some YouTube interviews, like podcasting with her mom and stuff with her dad. So she's very well spoken. She has a unique look, but a very contemporary look with a few tattoos and stuff. And I would like to see her on AEW be kind of an interview host. And she does some backstage segments and so forth. And eventually, say a year from now or less, they get Flying Brian Pillman in. And they do some interviews where they have Dakota doing a backstage segment, and then they do one of those. Cool. They do one of those Jim Ross Mick Foley interviews where it's like a teat to teat, you know, a Dakota interviewing Flying Brian, and people kind of pick up on, you know, like it's a little subtle, but hey, there seems to be some flirtation here between these two.
Okay, go ahead.
Then the next thing you know, they're kind of twittering. They have some photos together. Maybe there's some more interview segments, and you see a little twinkle in the eye, and the next thing you know, Dakota. Next thing you know, Dakota is escorting Flying Brian Pillman Jr. to the ring, and the next thing you know, they have a bit of a relationship, and the next thing you know, they're dating and so forth. Now, Dustin Rhodes, who's associated with AEW, he gets a little terse about this, and he starts making some statements, and basically, it's revealed in the ring, of course. With Dustin Rhodes, he forbids his daughter from dating Flying Brian Pillman Jr. He doesn't allow it. And then when Flying Brian makes advances, they have to have a match that if Flying Brian beats Dustin Rhodes, he can date his daughter. And they have this big crazy match, high-flying moves, blood and so forth. And then about 35 minutes into this bloodfest, high-flying, Dustin Rhodes at 52 years old is having the match of his life against the 26-year-old Flying Brian. Dakota's at ringside crying her eyes out. Dustin grabs the microphone and he says, Brian, you cannot date my daughter because your father is the father of my daughter. You are dating your own sister.
I love
that. That's what they need.
Going with it. I love it.
Thank you.
Now, that's a page right out of the Vince Russo playbook.
Yeah, but Vince Russo didn't write that. I did.
But here's No. But here's the reason why that would work. But wrestling fans need to know their history. Dustin and Terry Brian and Terry Runnels legit dated.
Yes.
Right before Dustin.
Yes.
And then when her and Dustin had gone Splitsville pretty much, and they had the Marlena and Dustin and Brian angle, Dustin wasn't too sure that Marlena Terry
let us also remember our history. The WWE played that angle already. Let us not forget.
You're right. No, you're right.
Ken Shamrock and Ryan Shamrock.
But Ryan was not his legit sister.
But they were playing it off like an incest angle.
Oh yeah. No, but I I like where Mikey was going.
Mikey is far more creative. You can tell he's a writer.
This is a storyline 30 years in the making, is what it is.
There you go.
So, you know, if
okay.
if
so
the
now
AEW had balls, they would run storylines like that. And then my other storyline, I think I shared with you guys last time, is that if you know, their transgender woman wrestler were to win their championship or to contend for it, they need to have a woman not want to wrestle her based on the transgender issue.
I think that's a hell of an angle.
It would be an angle that would get the attention of The View. Can you imagine the women of The View, Whoopi Goldberg and Meghan McCain and Joy
they'd be eating that shit
discussing AEW women's wrestling and transgender wrestling?
Meghan McCain would have a field day with that. Okay, so let's move on to 2020. All right. Let's talk about what's coming up. Predictions, not specific, but general predictions for, let's start with AEW. Start with Jeff. Where do you think AEW's headed this year?
Well, I think me and Mikey actually kind of already briefly touched on it, where we said kind of same old where they are right now. I mean, I think that they're doing some things right now that are really, they're starting to even kind of piss off their core base. And if they don't right that ship quickly, they're going to turn into the next TNA. Now, if they do right it, then they're going to be golden. If they hired Mikey Messier right now as a booker and as their sole booker along with Cody.
Well, let me put it out there right now. As Mike Messier's literary agent, Angelo DeCipio at Wrestling with the Future, and I will field all of Mikey's offers.
I mean, Mikey definitely, he did answer that when I asked him where he saw AEW headed. Okay. I would say, where do you see, now I'll ask Mikey and you, where do you see NXT being that is AEW's primary competition? Where do you see them going? Do you see them branching out Full Sail? I'll ask you that, Mikey.
I'll start. I do see NXT branching out of Full Sail because apparently their contract runs up in March or something. And I do have a feeling that if nothing else, because of pride, Triple H and Vince and Shawn Michaels will want to get the Full Sail troop out of the Full Sail a little bit.
I think and I totally agree, Mikey. I think NXT is clearly headed for a new home. It would not surprise me to see them follow the AEW banner and do a different city every week. I think that's clearly where it's headed. You're going to see, and I think, and I don't think I'm wrong about this, I think NXT has enough of a following to fill a 10,000 seat building.
No doubt in my mind either.
And I think that's where it's headed. I think you're going to see more arena shows in addition to the TakeOver franchise.
Well, I was going to say they're getting ready to run in February, I believe, their own separate, not included in a WWE pay-per-view weekend, right. Their own separate pay-per-view on a Sunday.
Well, that's where I'm going with this, Jeff. But thank you for picking up on that.
Yeah, and I think that right there is going to be kind of a tell-all to see are they getting the our TakeOver, is that the coattails of the Royal Rumble and SummerSlam and WrestleMania audience, or is it that they actually have that big of a following?
Well, let me ask you a question. That's a really, really good point. And I don't know, Mike, if you caught the question in there, but here's the question. Is it a bad thing for NXT to ride off the coattails of Raw and SmackDown?
No, I think it's a smart thing. It's not a bad thing. Because
okay.
Like I said, it's like, look, I run a film festival and I also run a theater festival, Avalonia Festival and Avalonia Theater Festival. If I were to totally separate them, I'd be damaging myself. So for WWE, if they run SmackDown, Raw, and NXT, you can divide that but you still want that consumer to pay for all three or pay for 2 out of 3.
Yeah,
you
right.
know what I mean?
That's the advantage that NXT has. They can ride off the coattails of SmackDown and Raw. AEW is self-contained. They have nobody's coattails to ride off of.
Here's a question.
They have to on their own succeed. Go ahead, Jeff.
Here it is. Do you see Vince McMahon stepping back even more? As we know, he has not been at a couple of Raws recently. Do you see him stepping back even more now that XFL is getting ready to take off here in a couple of months?
Okay, that's a real good question.
Go, Mikey, and then Angelo.
Do it. Will he actually do it, Mikey?
My feeling is no, and I hate to say it, but
I agree with you, and I said that to Jeff.
Well, what I hate to say is that I think Vince is suffering from early onset Alzheimer's or old age, something, and that's not. I'm not the first or the last to say that, and I don't say that with any glee in my eye or happiness about it.
I don't either.
I think Vince has aging issues, like a lot of people get, and but I think it's like one of those things where Stephanie or Hunter or Shane would have to legally prove that he's incapable of running the company to get that grip out of his hand. And I don't think they want to embarrass themselves or embarrass him and fight him legally. And from what I'm guessing and what some people have rumor and innuendo to me is that that's a big problem. Is that Vince?
Shout out to Conrad.
Well,
no,
yeah,
it's a legitimate concern because Vince is clearly, even by the admission of people who are close to him in the company today, Vince has clear perception issues. He's been called on more than one occasion by many people out of touch with the current product, that he doesn't know what's going on in his own company. But let us not forget, he's the guy who controls the purse strings.
Me personally, I think that he's going to still have his hands in it, but I could see him stepping back more and more and concentrating on the XFL. And this goes to what you had said earlier about Tony Khan and McMahon both having that I will not lose. He failed once at the XFL. He doesn't want to fail again.
He won't do it again.
He will. I promise you, before he is buried in the grave, he will do what he has to do to make XFL be relevant.
And that ties into Mikey's disdain for Vince's business practices.
Hang on, but here we go. Think about this. He now has a competitor over there. If anything, he's going to want to piss off Tony Khan's daddy, who owns Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, that's a real good, Jeff, I love the way you think. That's a real good tie-in because there is a football wrestling connection in both companies. Okay?
One owns a team and the other one's going to own his own XFL, his own league.
I got to have Mikey Messier chime in on this one because I'm chomping at the bit to know what you think of the football wrestling connection on both sides, Mikey.
I think that Vince failed at at XFL, and before that, he failed at WBF and the World Bodybuilding Federation. The movies that they've made, out of WWE films have been mixed at best, probably more failures than successes.
True.
And I'll give credit to Jim Cornette, who said it articulately enough, which is, why does Vince McMahon deny himself of being a wrestling promoter when he's actually really good at it, when he wants to be?
There you go.
Why does Vince constantly, it's like...
Good point.
Vince is look, this is what I really think, guys. Vince McMahon is a self-hating Southerner. He hates the fact that he's from North Carolina. He always tries to say he's from New York when he's from North Carolina. He hates the fact that he's in the pro wrestling industry. He tries to call it sports entertainment when we all call it pro wrestling. So he tries to cloud himself and he tries to say, I make movies, pal. Well, no, Vince, you make pro wrestling. And when you actually care about it, like you did at WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 2, you put on a pretty damn good show. And WrestleMania 3 was probably his peak creatively, not financially. But when Vince tries to raise himself to the level of Stanley Kubrick or Martin Scorsese or whoever Vince thinks he is in his mind, he flops. And that's why when I talk about me, is personally, I don't like when WWE supports Trump. It's not because of Trump. It's because I don't like my wrestling mixed with politics. So I think.
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother issue, Mike.
Well, I just want to wrap this up and say that me personally, and maybe I'm different than other folks, but when I think of supporting a company, as much as I've put into the WWE since age 8 or 9, financially, wearing the Ultimate Warrior jacket, wearing a Triple H shirt, even now, and I see this company doing things that I morally don't agree with, they're going to start losing the Mike Messiers of the world, and that's some of their most passionate fans. And the evidence that some fans actually do give a shit about some of these issues is the declining ratings. That might have been story number 7 of the top 2019 stories, is Raw's continuous decline in the ratings, Raw and SmackDown. We didn't touch upon that. And but the thing is, guys, it's like we can say that YouTube TV or Hulu or DVD-R, all this stuff is what the fans are watching. I really don't know, because Meltzer has done a good job comparing football ratings from 30 years ago to today versus Raw ratings from 25, 30 years ago to today. And it's very much leans.
No. I'll get into that really fast, and I'll just say this. AEW is only averaging 750,000 fans. They're supposed to be the new alternative, okay? They're supposed to be the alternative for the pissed off WWE fan. Okay, they're not getting it. They're really clearly they're not getting that audience. If they were, they would be getting a 2 or 3 million viewers. I think on a national level, either the fans are not paying it or not watching, or they are watching it on DVR or Hulu or the WWE Network or wherever they can get the platform to watch it. Because they may go on a Monday night and go, you know what, 3 hours, screw that. I can fast forward through the commercials.
Well, and Jeff, that's a point that we brought up earlier. There are so many alternative sources to watch the product now that I don't
think that is a true fair number, is what I'm getting at.
Well, yeah, and I know exactly where you're going with it. So the number of 750,000 that you cite, that may be a number that they can go by, but it's not an accurate number. Let's be real clear.
That's my point. And yeah. So okay, I was going to actually wrap it up here with this, and then I know we got a couple of announcements to make here, Angelo. Yeah. Where do you see wrestling going in 2020, Mike? Do you see it booming more, declining, staying the same? Indies, I mean, where do you see it?
This is going to be a weird prediction, but I have a feeling that this is going to be the wildest, most unusual year in quite some time. And I think that there are going to be things happening maybe June, July, August, mid-year that none of us can predict right now.
Yep.
Maybe some of these groups, maybe an MLW and an Impact will merge. Maybe New Japan will do some stuff over here. But I have a feeling that it's like, I don't know what's coming, but I think something very unique and that's outside the box right now.
Yes.
Is on the horizon.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm glad you mentioned the word merger. I can clearly see two companies getting together to merge, and it would not surprise me at all if it were AEW and NWA.
Yeah.
That would be a more perfect fit, in my opinion.
I was going to say I could see MLW and ROH. I could see Court Bauer going and making a play on ROH.
That's really possible too. But I think that the AEW NWA connection is far greater than the AEW NLW connection, which I think is more suited to Ring of Honor, quite frankly. Because let's be honest, Jeff, Ring of Honor needs a lifeline right now.
As I will quote Conrad Thompson, they're circling the drain right now.
They are big time.
Now, and here, I will give you proof positive. Last year, their final battle, their big pay-per-view of the year, that they have every December. Last year, they drew like 3,500 fans.
Right.
This year, legit 300.
Yeah.
Wow.
It can't all be attributed to not having the Young Bucks and Cody and the roster. Yeah. It has to be, attributed to other things that are going on in ROH.
Oh, yeah.
Now, by the way, BJ Whitmer, he let it be known that him and his wife have now split because she was out seeing people outside the marriage. That came out last night.
Okay,
work or shoot?
No, it's a shoot. He said
a shoot. Yeah.
Yeah. He said he wanted it to hit his social media before the dirt sheets picked it up, and he said that they were getting a divorce because she had ventured outside of the marriage bounds, and he couldn't agree with that.
Who's his wife again?
The ROH champion, the women's champion that they fired.
Yeah, blonde girl, beautiful, tall.
Yeah.
I was on a Twitter follower of hers, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay.
Well, we're actually going to do an entire show. Jeff and I actually spoke about it this morning, called The Marriage Ring.
This is going to be adult oriented.
It will be. Plus. We will talk about infidelity in the sport of wrestling.
Ring rats.
Yeah, boy. Well, we're not even going to get into that right now because we got some other stuff to talk about.
Go ahead, Angelo.
Okay, we've got coming up, actually next week, we're going to start off the new year with a fresh, brand new episode and a special guest. We have a woman who is arguably, without question, signed or unsigned, the greatest female wrestler in the country right now. She works the indies all across the United States and abroad. Her name is Casey Carlisle. She is the queen. She is the queen of wrestling, bar none. If you follow...
Former NWA Women's World Champion recently.
Recent, yep. So Casey will be our guest.
And what day is that, Angelo?
That is Tuesday, January the 7th.
All right.
And the very next day, on January the 8th, we have Daredevil Dave Dahl. And he will discuss the art of heel heat. And he is joining us for two reasons, not only to discuss heel heat, but he is on the verge of being signed by a major promotion that I am not at liberty to discuss, but he will.
Okay.
On January the 14th, Jason Knupp, our toy guy.
Hold up. Before that, we got on the 11th. Who do we got?
On the 11th, I have a show to go to in Philadelphia. Super crazy. I'm going to go see my friend Ron Starr.
Yeah, buddy.
And Ron will be a guest on the show in February.
All right, go ahead. Continue.
We'll get to that in a second. But January 14th, we've got Jason Knupp, the toy guy, toy collectible guy, will be here.
Yep.
By popular demand. But we barely scratched the surface with Jason.
His toy collection is insane from the 80s.
It's ridiculous. Oh, my God.
He would make any collector of 80s nostalgia toys jealous.
Yeah. If you are into action figure collectibles, wrestling figures, Jason's the guy. You want to see that show.
Yep.
On the very next day, January 15, we have our very own Mike Messier. We'll go head-to-head with Shane McKenna. I will sit back for that episode, and Jeff the ref will.
I'll give this ding, ding, ding.
It'll be a friendly duel, I promise.
Jeff is going to put his striped ref shirt on for that one.
Shane's a good guy.
And
meat,
that should be interesting. They will discuss social media and wrestling. That'll be a very interesting show.
All right.
It'll be a busy week because the very next day,
on the 16th,
if that wasn't enough,
go ahead.
If it wasn't enough to have Jason and Mikey in the same week, I got a bombshell. And she really is a bombshell.
Yes, she is.
We have the one, the only Nikki Roberts baby doll.
The perfect 10 herself.
Tully Blanchard's perfect 10.
I think she was a perfect 10 for a lot of young men.
Yeah. And I know, I said Nikki said, my co-host still has your poster on his wall.
Her daughter wrestles too, I believe.
She does. We had her in VCW and probably on like her first or second match ever, and she wrestled Casey Carlisle there.
Yeah. So we're not going to get into that too much right now, Jeff. But on the
like Mikey,
I want to plug it because that's a rabbit hole. I will be in Philadelphia. You want to come out and see me? I will be at Super Crazy Pro in Philadelphia at the old ECW arena. On January the 21st, it's our biggest. It's our third WWE Hall of Famer. He is none other than Handsome Jimmy, the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant.
Oh.
And on Thursday of that same week, we have wrestling historian and photographer, in-ring personality and on-camera personality, Scott Romer. Now, Scott Romer has another claim to fame that nobody knows about, and I'm going to tell you right now. He is Dick the Bruiser's son-in-law. And he's going to talk about his father-in-law, Dick the Bruiser.
Awesome.
And on January the 28th, to close out January, we got Jeff the Ref's favorite tag team in the world, Pats and Big Vinny the Fixer, the School Empire.
Yes, sir. Their gimmick makes me laugh. I love it.
Are great.
I'll tell you what, that is going to be our January. For some reason, Angelo would figure that me and him weren't busy enough, so he wanted to add more to our plate.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, my bad.
That's just January. Wait till you get February.
Well, I was just letting our listeners know January. I didn't want to tease them too much with February yet.
I'm just going to give them a couple.
Okay, go.
First half of the month.
All right.
So we got Old School Empire closing out January. But then February the 1st, a very special young lady will join us. Her name is Pam Allen, and you may not know her, but you all knew her daddy. He is the one and only dean of pro wrestling, the legendary Gordon Soley.
That is going to be a great episode.
Gordon Soley's daughter, Pam Allen, will join us.
Can I jump in real quick, Angelo? I've actually got a copy of Gordon Soley's book that I believe, I could be wrong, but I think Pam kind of co-wrote it.
She did.
Okay, so I've got a copy of that book, and it's excellent. It's not just wrestling; it's a different side of Gordon Soley.
Yes.
Poetry that he wrote as a young guy, doing commentary and short stories, and I'm trying to recall the title of the book off the top of my head, but I can visualize it in my mind. It's a great book, so that's very exciting.
Yeah, we got, Pam's going to be on February the 1st. Then on February the 4th, we've got Cowboy Johnny Mantell, joined by 3 other wrestling cowboys. And we're going to call that show the Old West of Wrestling. Going to all our cowboys.
Johnny Mantell was a world-class championship wrestling guy.
Yes.
Who was big time in the 82, 83, 84 at the Von Erich. So what stories Johnny Mantell and the other cowboys will have?
Yeah, boy. Yeah, buddy.
And who else?
Thursday of that same week, February the 6th, a very, very special episode dedicated to Bruno Sammartino. And we will be joined by Sal. Let me get his last name right. I want to make sure I get his name right. His name is Sal Correnti, and he wrote a definitive book with Bruno. It's the autobiography of Bruno Sammartino. And that's Sal Correnti, Corrente.
I think I have a copy of that book as well, to be honest with you. This is great.
And on Tuesday, February 18th, my old friend Rico Costantino will join us.
Awesome.
On Skype Live. Let's see. So, and the end of February, and I'll just leave you with this. We have the original hardcore icon, long before Mick Foley, long before Cactus Jack, long before Mankind. We have the original hardcore legend, Matt Tremont, a CZW original. And Matt Tremont is a world-traveled pro wrestler. He's wrestled extensively in Japan against Ibushi and Okada. And that's going to be a fascinating show.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, don't forget, somewhere in there, we're going to fit in Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal.
Steve Regal, I think he's going to be with us in either the last Thursday in February or the first Tuesday in March. I'm not sure just yet.
All right.
He'll definitely be with us for sure.
Yep. And
we're going to dedicate a special show to the legacy and the memory and the career of the Russian Bear Ivan Koloff, who Jeff will talk extensively about.
That is, if I can get through that episode without crying, it's going to be amazing. I'll tell you that right now.
You got a lot of Kleenex there, brother. And we're going to try and get Renee, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right.
I was going to say, I believe that, and maybe we're working on it still, but Bruiser Brody's wife, we had talked about.
Yeah, Barbara will be, yes, but she's not till March. Let me see.
Okay.
Let's see, February, March. Yes. Barbara British.
You're about ready to make me have to go old school and go get me an old date book like I used to do when I had to keep my referee days straight.
I was thinking about buying a paper calendar.
Now,
that's just January and February.
You know what's funny, really quick? You said you having to buy a paper calendar. If you can find a calendar from 1992, it's the same days as this year's. There's a friend of mine who's using his old WWF calendar from 1992 as his calendar this year.
Was Papa Shango in August or something?
I think so. And Ultimate Warrior's on the front. So
I knew Papa Shango before he was Papa Shango.
Well, I mean,
he was the Godfather.
Soul Taker.
Soul Taker. He came to my father's restaurant with my dear late friend, Pretty Boy Larry Sharp. Who was still being trained. His name was Bear the Soul Taker, and he had a tag team partner that you might know as Mark Callis or Mean Mark Calloway, who you now know as The Undertaker.
Yep.
And when these two guys walked into my father's restaurant, it was like they almost had to duck.
Well, I'll tell you this. We did have a little piece
was too low.
I think, I don't know if we want to wrap it up or not. We had a piece of fan mail from Gordon Riddick, who was wanting to know how me and you came to be.
Brother, that's a whole episode. We might do, you know what? We might do that. We might do a whole episode.
That would be fun.
We should, while we got Mikey here.
Yeah, go.
While we got Mikey here, We ought to do that. Let's do an episode of just the three of us bullshitting.
That's what we just did.
Let's do that. How we met each other. Now, Mike, I know.
I'll play the moderator for that one, and we'll get the answer.
I remember how I reached out to you, Mikey, I believe.
Yeah, you did. You reached out to me, but as far as you and Jeff goes, you guys were doing this for a while before I got involved. But yeah, Angelo reached out to me on Facebook, and we did our first episode. I think I was on in October, September. No, actually, it was on my way to Florida, so it was sometime September, October of 2019.
You're one of our very first. You're one of our very, very first guests that we ever had. So
I appreciate it.
Mike was our very first guest.
Out of the
Jack Victory was.
I was out of the South Carolina hotel.
Jacko Victory was.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, Jack was. Jack Victory.
And I mean, how me and Angelo came to be is a very unique story in and of itself. I mean, the fact that I messaged him on Twitter, and I said, "Hey, you know, I heard you on Kenny Boland's Bowling Alley podcast, and I would like to talk to you sometime." And he basically, I was like, he came back with his answer was, "I'll talk to you when I'm ready."
Yeah.
And I said, "All right." And I'm thinking to myself, what a dick. And literally 5 or 6 months later,
what I said was, I'm not ready yet.
Right. I got a message 5 or 6 months later. Okay, I'm ready to talk to you now.
Yeah.
He didn't forget about you.
No, it wasn't. What I said exactly was it wasn't time yet.
There it is. And then it balled from there, because within like 2 or 3 minutes of us even talking, it was, I'm being told that I need to do a podcast with you.
Yeah. Yeah, we were connected at the ass ever since.
That's cool. That's awesome. Hey man, origin stories are always fun. I had to mention
the three of us are going to do that.
Go ahead, Mikey.
I got to mention something about the Papa Shango and Larry Sharp thing, because when I was a kid, I went to the Great American Bash '89 in Baltimore. And Mark Callis, as you might remember, was on that show. Actually, he wasn't. It was Sid and Danny Spivey as a skyscraper. So it was before Mark Callis was there, or The Undertaker. But basically, before the show, me and my friends were walking around Baltimore, and this is still pretty safe back then, July 23rd, 1989, and we see a couple of big guys, and I recognized one of them was Larry Sharp, because I had seen him on TV with Bam Bam Bigelow, and he looked very Larry Sharpish with the white shirt. It was a hot summer day. He had a couple of buttons unbuttoned. He was wearing the suspenders, the peroxide blonde hair.
Long blonde hair.
And he had with him who we would know as Charles Wright or Papa Shango and Karma, the same guy, and he looked like a wrestler. Yeah. And so I went up to these two guys and I said, "Hey, I know you. You manage Bam Bam Bigelow." And I said, "Is this guy going to be wrestling tonight?" And meaning Papa Shango or Karma, Mustafa, Charles Wright. And Larry kind of, they were very polite. Larry said, "Hopefully," because I got the impression that they were bringing him to the show to introduce him to people. And as we know, he didn't end up on the show, or he didn't end up in WCW anytime soon. But I took a photograph of the two of them.
Wow.
Right where we were. Now, I held on to that photograph. I still have it somewhere. And 30-something years later, or whatever it was, I'm at a New England Hall of Fame wrestling convention, and there was Nikolai Volkov was gonna be there. Doink, Matt Bourne, one of Matt Bourne's final appearances before he died about a week later. Several guys were on that convention that I had original photographs that I took as a kid. Kevin Sullivan at the '89 Bash, and him and Mike Rotundo pushing each other after they lost to the Steiners, something that wasn't even televised. So I go up to some of these wrestlers at the convention, and I was giving them photographs of them from their career from 25, 30 years earlier.
Yeah.
And I gave Papa Shango, Charles Wright, a photograph of him and Larry Sharpe. And I had 2 copies, one for him to take and one for me for him to sign, which he did. And
right.
He was very shocked to see that photo, very thankful for it. Super cool guy. I didn't talk to him a whole lot, but he
great guy. Great guy.
But just to have someone like myself, 30 years in the making, to be able to give him a little, he might have even forgotten about that day. Who knows? But
right.
It was just a cool experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, let me tell you why they were there. Larry brought him to Baltimore because he was supposed to get a tryout. He was supposed to have a dark match that day, and he got bumped.
Right.
Yeah.
So he never got his tryout. That's why Larry brought him.
Yeah.
That was the reason.
Yeah.
I know the story behind that. That's why they went.
Yeah.
They ended up basically watching the show from backstage.
Yeah.
Because Larry at the time knew enough people, because he knew, Gary Juster and
right
people like that. Basically, Gary ran Baltimore.
It was a great show. I've got a Gary Juster story, but we'll save that. We're in double overtime with this episode, guys.
Yeah, we're in the 2-hour mark with this one.
We had a good show though.
We're going to wrap it up. We're at the 2-hour mark. That's long for us.
It is.
So we are going to say thank you to Mike Messier.
Thank you, Mikey.
Glad to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
MikeMessier.com.
Thank you.
Jeff, anything to promote?
Mikey already gave the brief shout there earlier, but this Saturday, Vanguard Championship Wrestling at Windsor High School, we're going to be doing a benefit for the Windsor wrestling team. They got a brand new wrestling team. They've only been in it for 2 or 3 years. So they need gear and they need different things and money to be raised for them. We're going to be coming in there. We're going to have Colby Carino versus the guy who just broke the wrestling internet world, Jordan Oliver, in a match that should be amazingly fantastic on the indie level or even on any level. But I mean, for an indie fan to see it is going to be awesome. And we're bringing in the badass himself, Billy Gunn. So,
and that'll be this Saturday night.
This Saturday night at Windsor
Vanguard Championship Wrestling.
And they can go to vcw-wrestling.com to get tickets, or you can find them on Facebook. Look up Vanguard Championship Wrestling, and they got all their information on there.
And they can buy tickets at the door.
Yes, sir. And tickets are all one price that night because it's basically going to be first come, first serve on your ringside and then bleachers. So...
And for me, a couple of things going on. You can find me here at Wrestling with the Future. You can also find me on my other channel, Psychic in the City. That's a whole separate ball of wax. But it will tie in a little bit to the Jeff and me episode. You'll see very interesting how. But again, you can find Wrestling at the Future on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Wrestling with the Future. You can find us on Twitter at Wrestling Future. We are not on Instagram, but we are on YouTube. You can find us at Wrestling with the Future on YouTube. You can also find the podcast in audio form on Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, iTunes. And the fillings in your teeth and carrier pigeon, and on Mike Messier's car radio, and
Barry Windham, Galoob.
Which one is that?
That's Barry Windham, the Galoob.
Oh, Barry.
Yes, sir.
I thought it was Steve Austin until I realized he had hair.
You know what I'm talking about, Barry Windham. I love it. That's awesome, Mikey.
We're gonna have him on the action figure show.
I got some good charms, and I always come prepared, guys. I've been hanging with Conan as well lately.
Oh, arriba la raza! Orale!
If I don't get us out of here, we're going to be here for another hour.
All right, thanks, guys.
On behalf of Mike Messier and Jeff the Ref, I'm Psychic Medium Angelo. Happy wrestling, everybody.
Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.